But I still. Somebody trimmed down a cinnamon bun just for me. Look at that. They made it smaller. It's my size. My size, Poppy. He had his own stuff going on.
I'm just going to run through quickly the elements of the comp plan, and then we'll be looking at the Unified Land Development Code and variances. So here, and you have these in your presentation, so you'll be able to look through them, but what I've set out here were the different future land use map designations and how many dwelling units per acre on the residential are allowed and what's allowed under mixed use, neighborhood commercial, etc. These here are the different land uses that we have on these two slides. This discusses the types of amendments which we talked about earlier in the meeting, small scales under 10 acres, and the procedures, and then the over 10 acres and the procedures. So that's all there for you. We went over that, but you can always read over that later again if you want to refresh your memory. And DEO has final review and approval. So we've mentioned all that.
Is it DEO that's holding up the groundbreaking with the tribal stuff?
I don't know who's holding that up. What's holding the groundbreaking up? The commissioner was asking. He was asking if it was DEO.
No, that is absolutely all of that is FEMA.
It's all
Yeah,
FEMA? Okay.
yeah.
I was thinking it was state.
If when you say, no, it's not at the state yet. When you say environmental historical preservation, EHP, that is FEMA. SHPO, State Historical Preservation Office, is the state. And so it goes through EHP, then SHPO, then tribal. Okay.
Okay, so we covered the future land use element, and this is the transportation mobility element that we have. This is one that we have to have. You have to have a transportation element. The main goal of this is was to, because we've already done this now, establish a multimodal transportation system that provides mobility options for cars, pedestrians, cyclists, public transport within the City of Lynn Haven city limits. The multimodal transportation system was adopted in December 2017 and replaced proportionate fair share and transportation impact fees through a grant and an amendment to the comprehensive plan. This, I wanted to make a mention of something here. Again, if you recall at that workshop that we had at the school with the apartments, we mentioned at that time that we could use these multimodal mobility fees to help with intersection improvements. When the people were complaining about the intersection there on Highway 390 and where the school road, the boulevard, met, we can use these fees.
And DOT is willing to research and do stuff during the widening, during the resurfacing versus the widening. So if we can get a letter to Philip Gaynor, the DOT, the head of DOT, and explain our situation up there, because that particular intersection is an F. You know, it's a failed intersection. They would be receptive to actually fortifying that intersection before the widening project, during the resurfacing project, because they are adding a bike lane at that time. So I've talked to the city manager about it briefly, but I think we need to encourage, a letter possibly from you, Mayor, and our commission to try to get that intersection something done, or they have a right turn only. Possibly put a blinking light where they could go out at a certain time and go left, So during the peak times of people's travel, they can get out on that, they can get out on 390 versus going back to that intersection.
You're talking Mill Bayou, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
talking Mill Bay, talking Cato.
Anything we
Cato
can do
Road
out there.
intersection. Yep,
And
Yeah.
that's what she was talking about. So
yeah, these
Yeah.
fees, the multimodal fees,
Could
can
be
be
used
used
for
for that. Like the way that things were set up with proportionate fair share, which we don't need now, it wouldn't have been possible. But this is one of the benefits of having this multimodal mobility fee. Now, there's 3 tiers to this fee. If people are in the CRA area, if they're developing in the CRA area, they don't pay as much. If they're paying, and if you're all interested, I can email that out to you, where the areas are and the fees, because you weren't all here when we adopted this. And then there is another, it goes up a little bit for the CRA area, which is the least expensive. And then there's what we're calling the urban core, and that is like the historic plat area mostly. That it's up a little bit for that, but it's still not the top tier as far as how much they pay. But the rest of the city, so the new development that happens with the subdivisions and like these apartments, they're paying full rate. And so one of the things already that we've had is we've had Horton complaining about the fees that they're having to pay for these apartments.
D.R. Horton.
Yeah, because they're involved with the building of these apartments. But I just wanted to kind of point out that we know that those people that are making the city grow are paying more, and that's because they're putting the stress on the infrastructure. We're having to have new infrastructure for these people. So basically what they're doing is, you know, they're paying for the impacts to the roadways. So we're using the fees that these people will be paying, but we can also use fees that other people have paid in the city to help with the improvements that are needed to get that traffic flowing. So that's a good thing. You know, the multi-mobility fee, which is why the state were happy about us doing it and actually wanted us to encourage people to do
The
it.
mobility fee, is that just an impact fee when they originally develop?
Yes.
Do a development?
Yes,
and that's
we don't call it
So
an
you keep saying
impact
the
fee.
people pay, which I know it eventually goes to them when they build it, but only the developer pays that
The
fee.
developer pays it.
Okay.
Yeah.
And Amanda, can that be, the mobility money, can it be used to help us create good infrastructure before complexes are finished? Like, for example, Mullet
Yes.
Highlands?
Yeah, it can be used. It can be used for anything that helps people move. So it can be used for roads, intersections, sidewalks, rails to trails, bridges, anything that helps with the mobility of people. Before, it was just roads and cars, and with prop share, it was just it would have to be used for that failing segment of road. But these mobility fees can be used anywhere in the city for any project that help people be mobile.
What was it we did a while back where we voted to approve the third-party inspections at a discount because it was done through the state, and it was companies like D.R. Horton that was going to have their own people do inspections?
Private provider.
You're
What's
talking
that?
private providers.
That's nothing to do with any of this.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right. And
Thankfully.
Different subject.
Yes. Yes.
Well, it's, you know, those type companies bring their own, they
Right.
do their own inspection.
Yeah.
And
Well, how, and coming back to the mobility thing,
I don't mind saying that D.R. Horton's just here to build houses and add units to their national company and then move to the next town where they can do it. You know, we're
the mobility
quality
thing,
growth.
why can't we use that money to do stop and go lights at the entrance?
We could.
We could.
We could. We have never done that. I was always under the impression it couldn't be done.
What's that?
Put stop and go lights at the Mullet Highlands, for example. That's just one. In the same way without,
Actually, the Cato Road thing for the Mill Bayou.
oh yeah,
We could get DOT to actually do that, DOT and the county, and it wouldn't really be a mobility fee thing because they're going to come through and do it again.
Right.
At the widening. If we can get them to do it at the resurfacing, they would go ahead and use funds of their own to do it. if we appealed to the director to do so. So
I get that.
That would involve mobility fees, so.
Yeah, but I remember Commissioner Russell saying, Commissioner Russell said that when they were doing
County
that
wouldn't
phase.
approve a light there.
Right,
Yeah.
they wouldn't approve a light.
Yeah, they wouldn't approve a light there.
The county.
Yeah, it's a count, because it's 389 is a
389 is the county road.
county road.
You're right.
But they, you know, the thought was, once the Andrews second phase is built, because of the cut-through from Mowat Highlands, instead of people going out to Mowat Highlands,
They want them to go through the
they-
other subdivision.
They might be able to, at that point in time, because I talked to, at the TPO, talked to Commissioner Griff or Commissioner Dozier, and they're waiting for that to be an F also on the on the capacity, and they're going to appeal for stuff to be done like that. When that Andrews second phase is actually built, we can do what Commissioner Russell did again and say, hey, how about a light there? Because the people from Mowat Highlands could go into that neighborhood. You could have a better intersection there for a left turn and whatnot, as opposed to what they have now. So you don't have to widen roads in Mowat Highland or anything. You could fortify the entrance at Andrews, and people from Mowat Highlands can go up there and make their turns, which isn't far. And they don't have to drive through their own neighborhood. They drive through the Andrews people, give them the finger, whatever they want to do, you know. So, you know.
Well, I would never want to buy property in that new subdivision where everybody from Mowat
know what I'm
Highlands
saying,
is going to be
Dave.
cruising by my house to go out to a light.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, if I get pulled over or something, I'll say, Pat Pernell told me I could do that.
Official.
When you say stop and go light, you mean traffic light?
What?
When you say stop and go light, you mean traffic light?
Well, yeah, I'm from Wisconsin.
I
Yeah,
just.
stop and go. Got to stop. and-
Cultural differences.
Yes, I know. That's what we were just talking about. Okay.
So the next element is the housing element, and this is in our comprehensive plan. This is the goal of the housing element. The primary goal of the housing element is to assure the availability of an adequate supply of housing to meet the needs of all present and future residents of the City of Lynn Haven for all income levels, especially the very low, and moderate income residents and those with special needs. This is something that probably goes against the grain to some of the people who live in Lynn Haven, I'll have to say, because I know from comments that I've had from some residents that they do not want very low income people living in Lynn Haven. However, the state requires us to provide housing for these people. Otherwise, you're going to have a lot of homeless people roaming around. You know, people have to live somewhere. We need low income people to serve us in POFOCs. The reason we don't have one of the reasons we don't have a steakhouse is because they cannot find enough servers, because they have nowhere to live for the amount of money that they would get. You know, at the beach, in a few months at the beach, they can make a really good income. But in the restaurants that we have in Panama City and around these areas, they don't make beach money as far as, you know, the tips that they get. Since we've lost through the storm some of the housing that we had for low income people, the restaurants have really been having a hard time.
When you say that the state requires us to provide low-income housing, are you saying that we as the city are supposed to provide the low-income housing, like build low-income housing, or?
Not build.
Oh, no, not public housing. We don't have to
Not
build
necessarily-
it.
I'm not necessarily saying public housing, but for example, like currently Panama City is building housing. They're trying to provide affordable housing.
We don't have to build it, no.
Okay.
We just have to assure the availability. So if somebody comes to us, we're supposed to, if somebody comes to us and they want to build low-income housing, if you were all to vote no and say publicly that it was because you don't want low-income housing, the city could be in a lot of trouble.
Has anyone approached us recently? I would say probably since Hurricane Michael, about low-income housing.
Recently approached us, I wouldn't say recently, but within the last year or two, definitely yes. Because one of the questions that comes up from board members oftentimes is this low-income housing? Because I guess that's what their citizens are asking them, is this low-income housing? We don't want, and nobody wants it near them. People will come out if they think that it's low-income housing. And it's a very, even though it's in our comp plan, this is exactly how it is in our comp plan. This was approved, this is what we're supposed to do. However, a more palatable term is workforce housing. So maybe when we do our update of the comp plan, we can look at maybe changing some of the wording so that we're doing the same thing, but maybe change it to workforce or something. I don't know. That's just a thought that maybe we could do that. And then we maybe wouldn't get so many people coming out against anything, you know, that... and we do have housing. We have apartments in Lynn Haven that you have to earn under a certain amount to be able to live there. So we do have some. We do have some.
Are those on 77 on the left-hand side that they're not moving quickly enough to repair? The whole
I think those
unit of brick?
are, but also behind Publix and
Yeah.
those ones also. They're rent
Also
control.
Pinnacle. You
Yeah.
got Pinnacle, that's open as well. The ones on 77, that's very true. They open up the backside, if you know, and they got
Yeah.
filled immediately. The ones in the front, they
On 77?
Yeah, the ones that are on 77, you're correct. They're moving very slowly. They're having trouble keeping workers,
Yeah.
which is part of their problem there.
Oh.
So you'll probably have something in the next couple of months, month or two, where you know, Pinnacle will probably come before you again, like we did last year, and asking for support for affordable housing. I can tell you, because I've been working with some housing agencies for the past couple of months, we do not have any open housing, period. Affordable housing, none. There's a waiting list at all of these places that are workforce housing. There's a waiting list, and then you do know off of Recreation Drive, that's going to be workforce housing, and I can guarantee you by the time that's open up, it'll probably be filled.
So aren't the apartments right across from Kane Griffith?
Townhomes.
Townhomes, yep.
They're not
Those are
affordable.
they're not affordable
No,
housing.
they are not
No, I didn't
affordable
think
housing.
so.
No, ma'am.
I didn't think so, okay.
And there's another
No.
phase going in.
And are we, how do I want to say this?
They're having a hard time.
I know you got on to me for saying Section 8 housing one time, so I've never said it since. But workforce, now the girl I talked to from Pinnacle the other day, we spent a couple hours talking about it. She said that it's a window of income. You have to make a certain amount, but you cannot make over a certain amount.
Okay.
That is correct.
And that's what she's identifying as workforce. Is that something we're just trying to switch to instead of, what did you call it?
No,
Low
we
income. There
whatever
you
we
go.
switch to, this is what we have said that we will do. The state also has requirements. So whatever we wanted to change it to, it would have to be a text amendment that would go to the state for their approval, and they may or may not approve it, because we are supposed to be making sure that we can provide housing for all the different income groups.
And the housing that we, that was up the hill, can't remember the name of it.
Hilltop?
Huh?
Hilltop?
Jack and Jill.
Where has that landed?
They're constructing them, I believe. Once it leaves
I went
my
up there to
department-
look one time and I couldn't find anything that
Oh,
looked
really?
like, but I didn't know exactly where.
It's up on the left-hand side, and their entrance is kind of narrow. It kind of opens up behind, but the building department would know. 'Cause once it leaves the planning department, once you all approve it, it goes to the building department, and then they are the department that interact with the
Very
developers
true.
after
Because I
that.
did go up to see if they were building
Yeah.
anything. I
Now-
couldn't find anything.
One thing that you all could do is you could require that the low-income housing has certain aesthetic standards. You can require that it looks a certain way. You know, you could not allow it to be more than, 2 stories, 3 stories. You could require certain landscaping. Just because it's low-income housing, it doesn't have to look awful. And if people live somewhere that's nice, they're more likely to take care of it.
I think the housing that we have right now, the Pinnacle and
They're very pleasant looking.
They're very aesthetically.
Yeah, and if you have not taken a tour through those apartments, I encourage you to do so. They are very nice.
Oh, they are?
They are very, very nice. They go through the Florida Housing Association in Tallahassee, and those, when you say income level, there are some income levels there, but it does reach into somewhat workforce housing, some low income. So there is a scale, and I think that it will meet the needs that we're looking for if we continue to look at those opportunities to do that.
Yeah.
Too bad we couldn't make those brick apartments on the left that we're talking about, have some sort of.
I tried.
They're ugly from 77.
I tried. I'm sure when they came in and met with us, the pictures they showed us were better than what they're actually doing.
She's exactly right.
Yeah, we
Miss
tried.
Miss Vicki and I went over there, 8 months ago, and I told them right to their face. I said, well, you can't paint these buildings. I said, these things are ugly.
They are
They
ugly.
look terrible coming
And
in
if
out of
that's the
town.
backside facing 77, and they probably only talked about the front side as far as aesthetics, and we can't even see that.
I even
from
asked them about
77.
I said, you literally have bricks that are different colors.
Doesn't look any better.
I said, it looks horrible. Well, that's the only bricks we could find, and then,
We did pitch some things to them about making it more appeasable for 77. We talked to them about maybe painting the bricks, doing some additional landscaping, which landscaping is required anyway, but doing some additional landscaping, trying to make it look better on 77. So our next step is, and we are in very close contact with them because we don't want those to go up without the city having some look in them as well, but really wanting them to spruce those up on 77. So we did pitch some things to them that they were going to share with their owner, and Commissioner Aldrich was there.
And I think if we had some aesthetic standards,
I
then
agree.
we would have had something to hold them to,
I
but
agree.
we don't. So,
So how would we, I guess, two questions. What would we need to do to develop some standards for that? Is that just something we put on the agenda? Is that something that you would develop and then we?
that's kind of what we were workshopping on, because those are being rented out, so they're commercial. Even though people are living in them, that's commercial. That's somebody's commercial venture, commercial business. If we, with the workshops that the city manager mentioned before, we were looking at those kinds of things. We were looking at it for commercial properties. We can look at it for apartments. You will workshop it. I'll bring you different examples. And then you just have to kind of decide how rigid you want to be, whether you want to come down to, I mean, you could just say, or if it's brick, all bricks have to be the same color. You could, or do you want to say that there's a certain color palette, or, it would be up to you in the end, but it's something that would take a few workshops to arrive at. And then once you've decided on what you want to go in the code, it's just a matter of an ordinance, because it's the Unified Land Development Code, which is city controlled. So
It definitely would have to include no glitter.
yeah.
No glitter on Highway 77.
Amanda, I know I can't
86 glitter.
I can't direct you what to do. That's Miss Vicki's job, but can we start dusting off those papers again?
they're dusted.
Okay.
They're sitting there waiting,
Let's
just
pick that- let's
waiting.
pick that
They
back
are
up.
waiting.
The pandemic and everything threw everything off for a year or so.
Yeah, I'm just waiting for you all to say when.
Okay, that'll
Yeah.
happen.
Okay, so that's the
Question.
housing. Oh,
My
sorry.
second question, as it relates to, right now we're talking about affordable housing as it relates to apartments. Well, let's say a developer comes in and wants to create an affordable subdivision. Are there any price requirements? Would we have any bearing on what the pricing would be for that housing? Because a developer can come in and say, this is affordable housing, but then if the market that he's trying to target can't afford it, then it's not affordable housing. And
Yeah,
I
they-
think that's part of the issue is what we're considering to be affordable housing isn't affordable for the target group that we're trying to get to moving to affordable housing.
You're exactly right. One of the problems is that the only people right now who are interested in building affordable housing are the ones that can get the tax credits, because land is not very affordable, construction isn't affordable, and so developers would say that it wasn't worth their while to build. We used to, a few years ago, we had some people that were looking at workforce housing, but they said that they can't make the numbers work. So I'm not sure if that's going to improve, but at the end of the day, they still want to make a profit. So it's really only the people that are going to the agencies for tax credits to help them that are able to build affordable. But usually it's apartments. I think it would be nice if and I think I've mentioned this before, if there could be more of a variety of style so that you can have what you find in other parts of Florida where from the outside it looks like a mansion house, but actually it's, we would call them masonettes in England, I don't know what you call them here, but there'll be downstairs and upstairs, but you'd maybe have, you know, a big door on the front and then there'd be a door on the side. So they look interesting, you know, they can be an affordable product without having to be an ugly box. But it is a challenge because usually you find those in these planned developments where they have a mixture of types of housing. It's getting developers to want to do it. Yeah. And I will, at this point, I will tell you about the people from LA. I've been contacted a number of times by this company from LA, California, who want to do something out at the John David property, the D&H properties, where those apartments are going in and the school is. But I've had to tell them, because of what they want to do is a cookie cutter, huge, hundreds of cookie cutter little houses that are rentals. That land use, I personally don't feel that that's something, but it's up to you guys. But right now they couldn't do it anyway, and this is what I've told them, is that the land use on that property is traditional neighborhood development. For phase 1, John David was given some concessions by the commission, some special exceptions on a couple of small things, you know, like the garages used to have to be set back from the front of the house, but they allowed the garages to be flush with the front of the house. A few little things just for phase 1. Now, their traditional neighborhood development is actually in the comp plan. It's not only in the comp plan as a T&D as a future land use, their particular Mill Bayou T&D is in the comp plan. They cannot, and this is what the previous commission agreed on also, and it's just the case. If they're not going to develop as a T&D, they're not going to meet the requirements of the comp plan. They need to change the land use, which is why they changed the land use to mixed use for those apartments. Those people are not going to be able to do what they want to do because it doesn't meet the T&D, which is supposed to be a nice mixture of types of residential and a little bit of commercial. If it's not going to be a T&D, they need to change the land use. And I'll tell you, they're going to have trouble changing the land use to anything else right now because of all the issues that property has. But I wanted to throw that out there in case they decide to start contacting you. They've been told what the situation is. And hundreds of rental houses. To me, I'm getting like horror movies in my mind, you know? And who knows what the rent will be on them? It doesn't mean that they're, you know, going to be affordable or whatever anyway, but I wanted you to be aware in case they contact you. So that's the housing element. Infrastructure element basically says that we have to have a level of service for all of our infrastructure, which is sewer, solid waste, drainage, potable water, and natural groundwater aquifer recharge. We also have a level of service for our roads, but they don't require that of us at the moment because we don't have proportionate fair share. But we still do have our level of service, so we know when the road is getting near failing. But all of these other things are required to have a level of service, and those level of services are in the comp plan. And when somebody wants a large-scale future land use map amendment, they have to say in their application what their demand is going to be, because we cannot allow a large-scale plan amendment to go through if we don't have the infrastructure or won't have the infrastructure and the capacity in place to serve it. That also fits in with annexations. You know how we talk about growth and we want to grow and we want the city to grow? When someone wants to annex into the city, one of the things that we have to look at is whether we can provide services to them when they annex in. So do we have water and sewer available to them? When they have to be contiguous, and we have to be able to supply them with the services that we would supply other citizens. So that's something we have to take into consideration with annexations. We have a coastal management element, which looks at our coastal high hazard area. We're not supposed to allow, we don't allow people to build in the coastal high hazard area, but they're able to cluster on upland areas. We have certain ways that we can help people with this if they've got land that are in the coastal high hazard area. I won't go into that too much, but just so that you're aware that we do have that. We have our conservation element. So if people, how sometimes developers have some wetlands on their property that they're going to develop, well, they can mitigate with the Northwest Florida Water Management District, and they can set aside some land on their property or maybe on some other property for conservation.
Or replant cypress
Or
they take out or something.
various things that they can do, yes. Or they can put money into a conservation bank that the state has. So we do have a conservation element, and we have areas on our map, our future land use map, that are conservation, and nothing will be able to be built there. Recreation element, the primary goal of this is to provide adequate recreation facilities, active and passive. We've just opened our lovely big passive recreation park, and open space areas for all citizens of Lynn Haven. So we're doing this. We're really ahead on this one as far as the recreation element. But this is the one that I said we don't have to actually have in our comp plan. When it comes to looking at it for the evaluation, I will be sending the pertinent elements to the various department heads, because even though I'm the one who kind of will put the ordinances together and send it to the state, I will not be the expert on the recreation element. I'll be sending that to Ty. When it comes to the infrastructure, I'll be sending that to Greg and to Bobby. So the people who actually the departments who deal with those sections are the ones that will be looking at their section in the comp plan and determining how that needs to be changed and updated in conference with you all.
Amanda, and Mayor, do you mind if we stop here? Because there are two elements that I really want to make sure, because you get a lot of calls on these. First one is conservation. I'm going to ask either Bobby or Chris to come up and talk about that a minute, because we do get calls where there's land behind them, and it's wetlands. And they'll say, well, the city owns it, and you need to clean it. And a lot of times they don't understand that we just can't go in there and put big machines and plow it out. So either Bobby or Chris, you can come up and talk about that a little bit.
DEP, right?
A little bit, and the process it has to go through so that you can tell them that even if they call you yourself. So Bobby.
Yeah, one of the things with conservation is when a developer builds something and he impacts wetlands, they're typically required to put other land in conservation. Once they do, you can't go in there and disturb it at all. So when it's labeled as conservation, that means no equipment or anything. Like all the dead trees, you cannot touch it.
Is that like a retention area too? They do that?
No, it's typically, because they did the retention ponds and they impacted a wetland,
Right.
they had to put something in conservation. And it's typically, a lot of times it is a wetland area.
Well, I noticed that, certain people replant their cypress in the retention area.
Right. Well, once they disturb the retention area, yes, they can make improvements within that. The conservation is undisturbed land where you just can't touch it once it's labeled.
Does this apply to the intersection that we've been talking about down there, Phase 2, next to, what's it?
Mowat
You
Highlands?
talking about St. Andrews?
Yeah, no, not St.
Like
Andrews.
Andrews?
Mowat Highlands,
Yes.
Talk about
The new
Andrews
complex.
Phase 2?
yes, Andrews Phase 2.
Okay.
Now, I was told that was wetlands on the corner. Is that so?
Well, wetlands is a little different if
Okay.
it's not
Think
put into
conservation.
conservation. Once it's labeled as conservation.
And who labels it?
Well, the developer typically by their permit. If their permit, they're impacting wetlands, DEP will make them put portions of it in conservation. So it's,
Okay.
yes.
And that's,
Right.
that's already gone to the state and been approved, right?
Yes.
That Andrews Phase 2.
What would be the point of a developer doing that?
So that land could never be disturbed ever again. Right,
Okay.
yes.
I know
And
there's,
it's a pretty big trade-off, you know, if they impact
Yeah.
1 acre of wetlands, they might have to put 10 acres in
Some of Highlands
conservation.
had protected land around.
Yes,
There is, right?
There's a lot of it.
Yeah.
there's a lot
Yes.
of it,
Yeah.
yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Other questions?
I know, I saw something, on Facebook, and I'm probably gonna butcher the name. I thought it was called like Darren Lake or something like that. Davis Lake?
Davis
Okay,
Lake.
Davis Lake. Is that what you're talking about, or I don't even know
No,
where
Davis
it's at.
Lake is actually controlled by the state.
So that's state property.
Well, no, it's actually private property. Their deeds go out in it, but it's regulated by the state. They tell us when to draw it down and
Oh,
everything
so is
else.
it in Lynn Haven?
Yes.
But we can't do anything until the state dictates us to do something about it?
Yeah, they typically, even when we put fish in it, they tell us how many fish to put in it and what to do. This year, they'll probably tell us to draw it down to nothing to kill the weeds
Okay,
in the winter. We do that about every 3 years, but they come
okay,
in.
so it does get cleaned up periodically then?
Yeah, when the vegetation gets real bad, typically that winter, they'll make us draw it down to nothing and let the cold kill the weeds.
When was the last time we did that, do you know?
It's been about 3 years, so it's
So it's
about
about
time for them
time?
to.
Okay,
They'll probably be notifying us in October, November, saying January, February, draw
February
it
is
down.
usually when they
Okay.
contact us.
thank you.
Was that helpful?
Question. So what about residents that have conservation land behind their homes and then the brush, trees on the conservation property actually begins to come over into their property, like overhanging branches or trees? Who's responsible for cutting that at that time if they can't like go back there and cut it?
Now, what we'll do, if it's deeded conservation to the city, which a lot of times it's not, it's the HOA owns it. If we see one that's in there that looked like it could potentially fall, we'll try to go in there by hand and just cut it and lay it down to avoid it from, and we've done that just recently, about a couple weeks ago we did that. Yeah. And you cannot put any kind of machinery in there at all.
Yes. So that's kind of our dilemma about conservation land. Wanted you to be aware of that.
I wonder, do people who buy that property that butts up to that, do they know that when they buy it? I wonder.
No.
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 A lot of, well, some do. Some say, well, I like the fact that nothing can ever be built
Yeah.
there. And then others say, well, there's snakes and rodents and animals. Well, that's part of
Yeah.
conservation.
I bought wetlands, so
But a lot of time, it's just deeded to the homeowners association, so,
okay. Thank you, Bobby.
all right.
And then lastly, I just wanted to touch a little bit on the infrastructure element as well, which you've asked about this, and I wanted to be able to insert this in here, which involves annexation, which is Greg. And Amanda, didn't you have a slide or a picture of the city of Lynn Haven? Would you go back to that, and Greg can kind of talk about that for a minute?
Push the wrong button. As the slide said, and Amanda had said, you know, for us to annex in, we've got to be able to provide water and sewer services. And if it's in the reuse corridor, we would provide reuse to there. Our rules basically say that when a new subdivision comes in, and reuse is close by, they have to plumb in that pipe so that we can expand our reclaimed water disposal system. Oftentimes, it's expensive to and it prices itself out for a developer or a home builder to run those services down. One area is Alaska Circle. Currently, we have a few homes on Alaska Circle that are actually serviced by water from Delaware. The homeowner whose lot faces Delaware allowed water service lines to run through his property to service homes on Alaska Circle. They have septic on Alaska Circle. They're not connected to the sewer system. The Delaware side is connected to the city's sewer system. So over the years, there's been a lot of creative ways to get services to certain areas. Expanding water and sewer utilities is very expensive, like New Jersey, New Hampshire, that area. To go in and lay gravity sewer down the street is expensive, but it's even more expensive to replace the roads after you've done it. So a lot of those projects kind of price themselves out to where they're not affordable. So it's big ticket stuff, and a good plan moving forward to take some of these smaller areas that are surrounded by city limits but not actually in the city. That's one of the stumbling blocks, is getting water and sewer to those areas to be able to annex them in.
On this map, on this map, all the yellow is not city, it's county, and the red that is not hatched. This is city commercial. The red is county commercial. So can you see that yellow and that red? It's surrounded by city, but it's county. It could be annexed in. That could be annexed in. That could be. All of these parcels here, could be annexed in.
But there's no services.
Right.
But there's no services.
No water and sewer services.
On Highway 77?
Readily, and I'll preface that, there's services, but they're not readily accessible. You would have to run city blocks, miles. You would have to put in a lift station, collect gravity sewer from the surrounding area, let's say at 40th Court here, this area right here. You could put a central lift station in there, collect sewer from all those home sites, but then you'd have to pump it to the sewer force main on East Avenue to get it to the wastewater plant. So a lot of infrastructure, that'd be another lift station to install, and then you'd have to collect all the gravity sewer into that lift station and then be able to pump that to the sewer force main that runs across town. One of the thoughts we were having was with the rails to trails, this corridor that runs across the city at a diagonal, is use that corridor for a sewer force main that cuts the city in half, and also a reclaim pipe that runs through that city that gives us alternative disposal sites for our effluent.
And a regional retention, right?
And a stormwater retention pond. Yeah, Bobby had some plans on that. So
The fella, what's his name, the Boudreaux guy with the Northwest Florida Management, we talked about that.
right at that meeting we were in.
Yep.
So big ticket stuff, big long-term planning ideas that affects the look and the growth of the city for 30, 40, 50 years.
Mm-hmm. Where does the money come from?
Well, you could do impact fees for expanding those pipes and conveyance systems to the plant. If you've exceeded your capacity of that sewer force main, you can't put any more water in there because it's physically impossible. You could use impact fees for that. We're looking at grants. We're looking at all different funding sources to kind of help expand the reclaim system, expand our wastewater system.
And you don't want to deplete your impact fees completely because of the fact that you may see some things come up that you're going to have to not improve, but something new that has to be done.
Exactly. The impact fees have to be for new construction, new impacts to the city to add additional capacity for that services to get there. The other way to fund some of these expansions is to, in our budget, just take and start biting away at some of these. Fire chief and I had talked a few months back about adding some hydrants down into the 19th Street area to expand fire protection in underserved areas. A lot of the water mains that were done in the past have been 2-inch water mains, and that's an easy thing. It was done in-house in the city by city staff at the time to get water down into some of these areas. Well, you can't do fire protection on a 2-inch line. It's got to be a 6-inch or better. So,
Thank you, Greg.
In regards to
Question.
annexation, what about the areas that already have our water and sewer? How difficult would it be to, and that may not be your question, but if we annex someone in that already has our water and sewer?
if they already have our sewer and they're contiguous, they can annex in if they choose to.
Grants Mill, like that.
Yeah. That was a good point. Grants Mill, many years ago, had the opportunity to annex into the city, but they did the math and the numbers didn't add up. So they're paying that out-of-city extra charge that we charge for water and sewer utilities for that. And it made more sense for them at the time.
You talked about the trail there and reclaimed water. What would you use the reclaimed water for?
Well, it could be used for irrigation on the rails to trails. You could have some really nice landscaping there.
Cool.
All the homes that back up to that and subdivisions could be tied into that reclaimed water main. We would loop it into Highway 77 so that you would have better pressures, better supply. But everybody that backed up to that could have that reclaimed water then serviced off the backs of their properties.
So obviously you can't use reclaimed water for drinking water.
No.
So, but if they were hooked up to reclaimed water, they wouldn't have to have the backflow preventer anymore then, right?
Correct. If you're using reclaimed water for your irrigation needs, you do not have to have the backflow preventer, which is on the city's potable water system.
Right.
That was the DEP rule that came back and said that any irrigation system connected to a potable water system had to have that additional level of backflow protection.
Thank you.
Sure. That also, we have coming on our future, the state has told us that we need to stop discharging our wastewater effluent into the bay. So as we move forward to this, now it's years away, we have to have a plan in place by November, but we need to be looking at ways to discharge of that effluent other than the bay.
When's the deadline for that?
2032 is the deadline. The plan needs to be in place by November.
Okay.
So that came to us last week. So it's
So we're working on it.
increased regulation on our water and sewer department that is adding to our level of stress.
Wow,
So
that's a whole,
that's
a
a
whole new
big,
ballgame for you.
Yeah.
it
That's
is.
kind of the way it is.
Yeah.
Here, you do this tomorrow.
Bam.
Yeah.
And we do have, we saw this coming. We do have some thoughts and we do have options. It's not it's a big task, but it's not unobtainable.
And it could be done right where your facility is. You don't have to move the facility or anything, right?
No, our facility would remain where it's at. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Any other questions, thoughts?
I want you guys to hear that. Thank you, Greg.
Thank you.
Thank you. So I think that hopefully one of the things that's coming out of this for you all is that just about everything we do, the services that we provide, the way that we do things comes down to requirements in the statutes and the comprehensive plan. Let's see, recreation, intergovernmental coordination. We have to coordinate with our adjacent cities and county, especially as much as we can. And we have interlocal agreements with them for certain things. We have mutual aid agreements. And also, when it comes to us updating our comprehensive plan, we have to involve those entities. When we annex in, we have to give notice to the county. So there is a lot of intergovernmental coordination. With floodplain management, we coordinate. So this is a requirement, so we do that. Capital improvements element, we have to have this element because this is showing how we are going to meet our level of service for all the things that we've talked about, those infrastructure needs, how are we going to maintain the level of standard, meet deficiencies, provide repairs, and accommodate future growth, and how much is that going to cost us? Looking out ahead, that's in our capital improvements element. Our concurrency management system, again, is what we just discussed as far as ensuring that new development does not occur faster than the city's ability to provide for infrastructure in a financially feasible manner necessary to support the new development. So we might want to grow, but we can't grow unless we're providing those facilities to that new growth. We can't. Legally, we're not allowed. Unified Land Development Code. So that's the comp plan finished. The Unified Land Development Code is kind of like our toolbox, everyday working manual. This is what developers use when they want to come to us with a project, when their engineers are putting an engineered site plan together. We have our technical standards and we have a Unified Land Development Code. This is an ordinance that was adopted and established as our official regulations, land development regulations, in compliance with the comprehensive plan. I'm just going to run through the chapters. The first general provisions chapter just lays out certain things such as, the city manager, where there's gray areas, she has the final say, certain things like that. The chapter 2 is land use districts and permitted uses, so that comes from the comp plan. Chapter 3 is our environmental and resource protection, so that links into our coastal management and our conservation and all of that in the comp plan. Chapter 4, this is the one that we'll be looking at to change, if you want to change the aesthetics of certain buildings and requirements for affordable housing, that kind of thing. So chapter 4 is our site design standards. It includes densities, the 1911 historic plat information is in there, appearance standards, lot design, overlay districts, all of that is in chapter 4. Chapter 5 looks at temporary situations, special use situations, such as home occupations. Can we have a shed, a pool? Will it meet setbacks? What kind of sign can we have? All of that is chapter 5. Chapter 6 has our concurrency and infrastructure requirements, potable water, sewer, reclaimed water, stormwater, transportation, street access and design. So you can see how the comp plan is feeding into our Unified Land Development Code. It all ties together. Chapter 8 is where we have information on the various commissions, boards, and agencies. We are required to have a planning board. It is a requirement. So their roles and also the Board of Adjustments roles and also which things come to the City Commission are in Chapter 8. Chapter 9 deals with variances, which I'm going to talk about in just a little while because I think it's really important for you all to understand variances because I'm sure you get questions about those. And Chapter 10 are the administrative procedures that we have to, in the planning department and land development, have to adhere to. So we've got our public noticing requirements, our public hearings, those kinds of things. Not citywide, not for every single ordinance, but for the things that we deal with in land development. And then finally, there's the wireless telecommunications code, the cell tower ordinance. When somebody comes to the city for development, there are basically two types. There's residential and non-residential. If they are just wanting to build one house or a duplex, they don't need to come through the planning department. They just go to the building department and pull their permits. If they want a commercial building, a triplex or above, subdivisions, they have to come through the planning department, and for minor subdivisions. Also, they need a development order if they're changing the use on a property. So let's say there's a commercial business somewhere, and then those people leave it, they were renting it, or they sell it to someone else, and those new people want to put a different type of business in there. They have to come to us. We have to look to see if they need a development order, because just because there was one business in there, if it was a different type, they may have different parking requirements. This is something we find all the time. And I think I might have mentioned when we had the strategic planning, across from the cemetery, there is that doctor who's there, Dr. Patel, I think. He's a psychiatrist. That poor man, the people who owned that property asked for a land use change on that property. And it was changed to mixed use, I believe it was mixed use. It had been residential, and it was changed to mixed use the day after the land use was approved by the commission. So even before it had waited its 30 days, the very next day, that property was sold to Mr. Patel. And Mr. Patel was not told about all the requirements and what have you. He thought he could take a single family home because it was big enough, just get a few building permits to change the inside of it to make it a clinic or a doctor's office, and he'd be good to go. He tried to do that. The building department was like, no, you can't. This is a change of use. This was a house, a single family residence. You can't just now operate as a business. And so he had to apply for a development order, and that's when he found that he had to have engineered site plans because he had parking requirements, and it had to be a hard, dust-free surface. If you go over 500 square feet of additional impervious, if you're a business or subdivision or what have you, you have to have a development order, and you're going to have to address your stormwater. So it's like a snowball effect. You need parking. That parking is adding additional impervious. You're going to have to show us your stormwater plans as to how you're going to accommodate that additional impervious. And he was unfortunate that he got a contractor who did not do what he was supposed to do, didn't wait until he got his development order, started digging holes. It was a nightmare for that man. Plus, there were issues with regard to water and sewer. So even if it appears that it will be okay, I'm going to buy this, move another business in. If anybody ever tells you they're going to do that, please make sure they call us so that we can let them know what they would actually have to do and save them money where we can and help them find the best, easiest route to getting where they need to be. So residential, non-residential. When we get an application for a development order, so when someone does want to build commercial or a subdivision or something they need a development order for, they submit their application and their engineered site plans. We then submit those or send them out to the TRC, the Technical Review Committee. And the Technical Review Committee are basically the departments that deal with all of those things that we just talked about in the comp plan. So it's Public Works for their infrastructure. It's Public Utilities, Greg, for his kind of infrastructure. We look at the planning aspects. We look at, the site design to make sure setbacks and buffers and all of those things are in place. They look at the technical standards to make sure that the roads and streets are going to be constructed appropriately. And also we send it out to contracted engineers to make sure that the stormwater facilities are going to be adequate to deal with the stormwater runoff.
And Amanda, it's not, if it's an engineer that is one of the city engineers, then another engineer company looks at it, correct?
We have contracts with a few different engineering firms because an engineer is not allowed to review their own work. So if we get a submittal from Panhandle Engineering, let's say, we send it to Dewberry. If Dewberry were to submit something, we could send it to Panhandle. And we've always got Mott MacDonald as well that we can send things to. And I think this might be a good place to say, because I know, Commissioner, you've been talking about us having a transportation engineer. I think that maybe the next time we go out for like contracts, or maybe we should just do it anyway, is go out for RFP or RFQ for a transportation engineer. The engineering firms that we use now would probably say that they can do transportation, but there's roadway design engineering transportation, and then there's looking at volume of traffic and being an expert at that, and it can be very smoke and mirrors. And if we're talking about level of service on the road, it's better for us to have a contract with one or two transportation engineering companies, so that not only can they help us when we are looking at our system and want to figure out what we can do, but when someone submits something to us, such as the apartments, and I ask for a transportation trip generation, you know, show me how many new vehicle trips are going to be created by this development, but then also distribution down to a couple of intersections maybe. What percentage of the traffic is going to turn right, left, how many straight on at that intersection, how many right, left. I mean, it's a real science. And we really need experts. We need companies that do this. This is what they do. They're experts at it, such as Kimley Horn. That's one I'm just throwing out there. They're expensive. But what we would need to do is, I think as we're getting more traffic now put on our roads, I think we're at a point where we probably do need to have continuing contracts with a couple of firms. We can require the developer gives us information, and then just as we do with the stormwater, when we send it to an outside engineer to review, we can send that out to one of these companies to look at, so that they can tell us then, okay, in order for this to work, they're going to have to do this, put a turn lane in, tweak this, do that. And then we can put that in our fee structure. It's just a thought of putting it out there.
Are there currently other municipalities or the county that do this? And like, so we don't have to reinvent the wheel? Like, are they using someone to do, like a company?
The county probably has their own in-house. You know, they have so many staff. I think they probably, I know they used to have a transportation engineer, but definitely other cities. When I was in Callaway, we had contracts with transportation engineering firms. So yeah.
Would the county do it for us and at a fee versus?
That might be a conflict sometimes, because sometimes we're putting traffic on their roads. Yeah. But it shouldn't cost us anything. If we have contracts with a couple, then we just make sure that that's part of the development order application fee. Just
makes sense. Handles the issues that we're facing right now.
That's a really good question. Would the commission need to do something for that? Yes, I would have to put it on the agenda.
It would have to be an agenda item, and then the commission would have to ask us to send out an RFQ
for either a firm or a person.
Let's put it on the next
I think
agenda.
probably a firm, because then they have different people. They usually allocate you a person. Each firm would kind of allocate you. And then we can use them also, like I said, if we get to a stage where we want to look at our transportation system, like all our roads in our city, and look at which ones are beginning to fail, and can we do something like make improvements on alternate roads to help relieve some of that congestion? It really needs an expert to do a study on that. So, you know, we could use them for studies if we wanted to as well.
Especially as fast as we're growing right now.
Yes. And not just our traffic. We're corridors. We have other people's traffic coming through us all the time.
Everything they're dumping on 390 right now and 389.
Yeah. If it was just ours, we'd be okay. Most of this traffic is not our traffic. Yeah. So
Yeah, it's going to be.
Can we get that on the agenda?
Probably we'll do the first. I would say the first meeting in August. That would be a really good time, and that would be a good time to do that. And then that'll give us time to maybe include that in our budget if that's something you pass. Okay?
And that will really help you when you get developments come, because you'll have the reports then as to, you know, the traffic conditions and, You know, they will usually suggest to the developer remedies. Then it's up to the developer if they want to pay for that remedy or not. Okay, so the TRC, so everybody gets their bit to review. They, on the plans, they then send their comments back to me. I send them back to the engineer who submitted the development order. They fix the things that need to be fixed to bring it up to city code or state requirements and technical standards. Once everything is good to go, once it's met everything, we then take it to the planning board for their recommendation to you, and then we bring the development order to you so that you can approve it. And then once it's been approved, that's when the developer can start pulling their building permits.
Question. So once you look at it, you make sure everything meets the requirements, take it to the planning board. What are they actually doing? I've heard what they do, but I mean, what are they actually doing when they're reviewing what you brought? What are they?
They are supposed to be looking at it with regard to those elements that are in the ULDC and the comp plan. Even though we've reviewed it and we're saying it's good to go, they're supposed to be looking at it. Really, they should go out and look at the site or whatever as well, and are making a recommendation to you as to whether, in their opinion, this project should go ahead or shouldn't, and if not, why. They have to give a reason as to why, if not.
Have there been any recent projects, let's say within the past 6 to 12 months, that have passed through your desk but gets to the planning board and the planning board says, no, we don't think this should be?
Yeah, I think maybe the apartment complex one, that I think maybe that did, and I think they said they recommended against it, and they had a lot of people come out, as you can imagine. Usually there's only like 2 people come into the planning board meetings, and I feel like they felt like they were under a lot of pressure, and also they had sympathy with the audience. They had sympathy with the citizens, and so they were listening to what they were saying about the safety issues on the road by the school and those kinds of things. And then we bring their recommendation to you.
So although the planning board recommended no, it still comes to us.
Yes, because it's just a recommendation. They're not a decision-making board.
We've had that happen.
They just make a recommendation for you to consider.
Got 2 pollers.
And so when that comes to us, what then is our responsibility as the commission? Like, what are we actually looking at to approve or disapprove? For example, like with the Mill Bayou apartment issue, where there was a lot of citizen input. However, the commission still voted to approve it. So what should we as commissioners be basing our vote on, I guess is my question.
If the land use is the correct land use, then you really have to kind of find something that they haven't done that they should have done. So if it's the correct land use, they're allowed to do it. If they've met all the code requirements, if they meet everything in the code, then you can't really say no on those grounds. If the technical standards have been met, you can't really say no. If the traffic issues, and in this case they have got 2 entrances for each of those, and they have got another road that's coming in. So even though the way the comp plan reads is that those things don't have to be in place immediately, but they have to be in place. And they will be in place by the time that's fully open. So there really wasn't anything that you could say no on without knowing that you were going to be challenged. It would probably end up as a legal dispute.
Right.
We'd probably lose. But it comes to you so that you can, because you're the decision-making board. We can't say yes. We can only make recommendations to you. And you might, when it comes to you, you might find something that we've missed, you know? But ultimately, at the end of the day, you make the decision on it.
So Amanda, it has to be something that is in this code that we missed somewhere.
Something they're not meeting.
That's exactly right. Okay.
Go ahead.
I just have a question about the whole Mill Bayou thing. In your professional opinion, do you think if we would have had a traffic engineer, that those costs and everything, and we mandated that that developer use that traffic engineer, that we would not have the problems we've got now there?
Not have the problems. What
Well,
I can
I mean,
tell
as
you
far as-
is that segment of road that that school is on 390, is not failing. Other segments of 390 are.
Right.
That segment is not failing right now. And they're also, they're putting an entrance onto directly 390 and then one on the boulevard, and then the north portion, they've actually split them into two properly now. The north portion is going to have that exit at the top, which can go out to the east, and then one on the boulevard. I don't know what a transportation engineer would have found, but right now 390 isn't failing, so there is capacity.
I'm just all for the transportation engineer.
Yeah,
And
because
I
you don't
think we
know,
could
what
eliminate-
they'll find. Because like I said, it is very much, they'll find things sometimes, you know? It is, they say it's like a moving target. It's smoke and mirrors. It's kind of, you look at it this way and it's this way. You look at it this way, which is why developers can get one over on us sometimes.
And I think the cost should go to them, to the developer, for the engineer instead of, you know.
Yeah. Now, when it comes to you, you could find some kind of safety issue or something, but it's not that you don't always have to say yes. You're not rubber stamping it, but if we say no, you really have to have a valid reason for saying no.
Right.
Yeah.
So many things going through my mind on this. I'm just trying to get all my thoughts together. But with the Mill Bayou thing, and I don't want to step on anybody's toes, but I think deep down, I'm trying to think if I was on the board at that time, if I would have done anything different. I don't think I could have done anything different because of the legal aspect that you covered. So I think emotionally, though, I don't think we wanted to pass through because of the safety concerns and things like that. But I think us as the commission, we need to portray that message to the residents to make them understand the process that you explained to us, because I don't think the public understands that. I didn't understand that at the time before I was commissioner. So I think the only thing that we can control, though, is what's in this comprehensive plan, because that's what you go through to make sure that we're abiding by everything. So the only thing I can think of is we look at the Mill Bayou example and say, is there something that we should have had in here that we did not? And if that's the case, then we need to have that added in here. Am I missing something there?
Even further to your point, the Mill Bayou thing was over 10 acres, and it went to the state, and the state approved it.
The state
Oh, so
approved
we-
it for the number
You know
of
what I mean?
units. It was pre-approved
So
for more than
it
that
was-
number of units.
It was pre-approved through the state.
Yeah.
So we really didn't have any
We
say
did-
so
It
on
went
it.
to us twice. It went to us once because we had to send it to the state, and legally we were bound to do that. So we sent it to the state, and the state came back with full approval. And so you got your developers sitting there going, I've done everything I'm supposed to do. The state said yes.
So even if we had something in our comprehensive plan,
Your con-
comprehensive plan, it wouldn't have mattered because it has to go to the state?
Right.
It had to
and
go to
right?
the state
comprehensive
because they
plans
had
have
to
to match
change,
up.
yeah, they had to
Yep.
change the land use because it was TND. And in order to do what they're doing, they changed it to mixed use. So that portion for that development, for those apartments, went to the state as a large-scale future land use map amendment as mixed use. And in the comp plan under Mill Bayou TND even, it has a number of units that they're allowed. So what the state did is they looked to see the number of pre-approved units. These units fell under that. As far as they were concerned, this is less intense than it was going to be, less density, less units than they could have. The state had no problem with it. So the state came back saying, yes, they can have this number of units on that property. They were fine with it. It went to DOT, it went to DEP, it went to all of the state agencies.
So when it goes to the state, do they look at our comprehensive plan to make
Yes.
sure? Okay, that's what I'm getting at, is if there is something in here that we should have had in here for that example, then I think that's something we need to look at.
I think from the residents I talked to, the issue was that they didn't realize that it was a mixed-use land that when they bought their land in Mill Bayou for their home, they thought they were buying in the TND, not realizing that this was mixed use and that apartments would be coming in next to their homes. Although the safety issue was part of it, which is, a valid argument, from the ones that I've talked to, we're just looking at the value of their home declining because now you have these, 500 plus apartments that's going to be built next to you. So I think that was part of the issue. Was it was changed to mixed land use from what I can remember, I think back in 2005 or something like that.
No, sorry, I hate
okay.
to say so. Sorry, I hate to say no.
Yeah.
But they are incorrect. That land use change went through last year, I think it was, or the year before. Those people came out to it. They knew it was changing. They were there at the meetings.
I'm saying when they bought their homes.
When they bought their homes, it was TND.
TND.
But when
Right.
it was changed to mixed use, they came out to the
remember that.
meetings, and they knew that it was being changed to mixed use.
What I'm saying is when they bought their homes, for example, before Hurricane Michael, they bought it with the idea that this is TND,
That it would stay TND.
and that it would stay TND.
Yes.
And so then when it changed to mixed land use, that's where sort of from the ones I talked to, the
Yes.
argument was, I didn't buy this with the idea that you're going to build apartment complexes. For example, just like the individuals in Moat Highlands, they bought Moat Highlands, and now there's townhomes going up around Moat Highlands. Well, I didn't buy in Moat Highlands to have townhomes built around. So that was,
Same thing.
Yes.
but I think they couldn't get.
More dense.
Yes.
So then I think it just changed to the safety issue once you couldn't get past the fact that, okay, this is mixed land use. We can't stop this guy from building on this land because he does have the mixed land use. What else can we come up with to maybe stop this? Although it's legitimate concerns, that was my understanding from some of the residents.
I think, Amanda, it does go back, though, farther than just where we are right now. I think you kind of gave past experiences where it started out and then where we got tripped up in the city. We had the inherited decisions to make some decisions
Right.
that probably were not going to be
Yes.
popular.
And
Like
what
no two
those people,
entrances, buying a house when there's only one entrance and there's a school.
right.
Right, that's what I'm getting at,
Yeah.
is.
But
is-
that's in our comprehensive plan now,
What-
that you
what
can't
they
have a
don't-
development without two entrances, right?
You over 50 units, you have to have the two entrances. What the people didn't realize is, though, that in the TND, there were always going to be apartments. Always. These apartments,
Yeah.
apartments were going to happen in the TND, and shops. Also, a TND has multifamily, single family of various income levels. It has commercial. So I think those people, when they bought their houses, they bought them from Horton Homes, and Horton Homes will tell anybody anything to sell a house. It's my personal opinion. It's just my personal opinion. It's not a city opinion. And those people were told that they were only going to build single-family homes there. That was true for Horton. They were only going to build single-family homes, but that wasn't true for the TND. They didn't know. Horton didn't tell them. They probably didn't know. They probably didn't care that there were always going to be townhomes, apartments
Right.
of various styles.
And
There
they
is
were told that
nothing
by the
there-
developer, right?
Sorry?
They were told that by the developer.
No, they were
no?
told that by Horton when they were buying their houses.
Oh, okay.
So there is nothing there now that wouldn't, or coming, that wasn't going to be there under a TND. It's just with the TND, it would have looked better. They
Well-
would have had to have different streetscaping and different look to it.
And the other thing I think was a big thing that came up was the traffic study. And I don't think we control that, do we? Or is there something we can put in here for the traffic study? Because it was done, I think, between like 4 and 6 p.m., which is not the peak time for traffic.
That is the PM peak hour. That is
That
when
we have no control over that?
Well, let me back up a little bit. Before DEO was DEO, when it was the Department of Community Affairs, they were stricter in what we sent to them for review. So, you know how I said that when we send something over 10 acres, it has to go to all the different reviewing agencies, and it did. It goes to DOT, DEP. DOT used to require that when we sent a future land use map amendment to change the land use, that when we sent the traffic analysis, we had to send PM peak hour. It was a requirement that that's what they wanted to look at, because usually that's when there's most traffic. So the reason that we asked for PM peak hour is because that's what the state had always required us. They don't require us to do that now. They don't ask for any peak hour now. They just look at the average daily, how much traffic is on that road in a day, and whether it's failing its level of service or not. But we used to have to send them PM peak hour. And so the standard, even though it's not in a law or a rule anywhere, traffic engineers will tell you that the standard is you look at PM peak hour.
But is that something we could add in our comprehensive plan or not? As far as doing
I'm not
traffic?
sure you'd want to put it in your comp plan. You'd probably want to put it in your Unified Land Development Code. So because it's our code that people look at
Right.
when they're designing their developments and everything. If we're not required to have it by the state in a comp plan, I wouldn't put anything in the comp plan that we're not required to have, to be honest, because it's easier for us to change things in Unified Land Development Code than it is in the comp plan.
Okay.
And we've got our mobility element now. So, but you can definitely have requirements for different requirements for development order submissions. Or even when somebody does apply for a land use change, you can ask for a transportation analysis. But the only problem with that is that when someone asks for a land use, there are often a variety of things that they can put on that land. And when you make decisions as to whether to approve a land use or not, you're not supposed to be making it on what one particular person is going to put on that land, because they can do what that other guy did and they can sell it. As soon as they've got the land use, they could sell it. So they could tell you, I want mixed use just because I want to put so many residential on there. But then they could sell it after they've got the land use change, and someone could put a gas station there. So you're not supposed to be making your land use approval decisions on what you think someone, that's not supposed to come into it, what you think someone's going to put there in particular. You're supposed to be making it on all the possible things that could go there. So that's why it can be a bit tricky. If you ask for a transportation analysis at land use amendment stage, they're going to want us to look at the worst case scenario, like as far as the most dense, intense, most traffic thing that is going to go on there. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I don't want to open up a can of worms and make a decision that, you know, is going to hinder something else. But
I think we can put it in the Unified Land Development Code. We can put it as one of our requirements for development order is that they submit the traffic impact analysis.
But now, with the traffic impact analysis, one was submitted for the PM hours, but are you saying that you want one for the morning hours as well?
well, I'm
We
just
can.
using this as an example because
Yeah.
this is a
If it's
big,
near a school.
and because I do it here, that might hurt.
Feet of a school or a month?
And it might hurt another development, so we got to be careful how we word it.
Right.
But I think there's some lessons to be learned with this thing, not necessarily the commission's fault, it's just something that we never foresaw coming. Well, actually, you could look back at it and say, yeah, there's some things you could foresee with this. And we just need to make sure that we have things in the code that protect the residents, especially when it comes to safety. And I don't know how to word it. I think there's a way we could word it.
I know what you're saying, and you got to go way back, like, because there's only one entrance in and out of there. So there, you know, right now there should be, by today's standard, there would be two, right? For that many houses in the development.
How many? I'm not sure how many houses
And
they
then
got.
having the
Yeah.
school there, you know, so there's,
I think the school played a big part.
yeah, but I think there's like 80, how many houses, 80,
The
90?
school, I'm not sure how many have been built because I'm not in the building department,
Uh-huh.
but there were going to be about 80 houses out there. I'm not
Yeah.
sure how many there are out there
And
right
that would
now.
require two entrances today, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I'm just trying to think of exactly what it says in the code. I'm not sure if it's just for,
That's the kind of stuff we got to look at.
Right.
Morning
That's what
and
I'm-
night makes sense, even if it's just a huge apartment complex, whether there was a school like Bill Bayou, because people have to go to work. I mean, you know what I'm saying? So I think the traffic thing should be morning and night when people.
we could require an AM and a PM.
Because-
And another thing with the school is we've actually got something coming before you, another development order. Initially, when that school first went out there, they had their initial school. This is how big we're going to be. They keep adding to it. And every time they add to it, they tell us it's not going to create any more students. Well, this latest thing they're adding, this marine science building, I asked, how many students, how many additional students? They said none. But they're going to have something like 20 more admin staff. They can't tell me they're going to have 20 more admin staff and not more students. They are a major problem out there as far as the traffic, and yet they get this money donated and they put it into putting new buildings in there, and they're not putting any of it into looking at their traffic issues and helping to solve they cause the traffic problems.
So how can we,
Ball stadium out there.
is there anything that the city can do to help resolve the traffic problems? I mean, it does, I mean, like going down 389, it's a big traffic jam whenever they're getting out of school. Even though they've opened the second entrance, so I guess the first entrance coming from 389, now people just get there earlier and just block it up going further down 389, so.
I think they should have had 2 entrances going into that school. I think they should have had another one, like further to the west. They've got all those ball fields out front, but I think they should have had one come in that side of the building as well. Yeah. It would be really nice if anybody's got any kind of power with the school board to find out if there are going to be any additional students with this new building. I'd like to know how many students they open with and how many students they've got now.
That needs to be communicated to us. That's going to make a huge difference.
Yeah. Well,
Yes.
I guess from the school board perspective, because they're a charter school, then they're in the district, but they're sort of overseeing their own school because they have their own school board, they have their own administrative board
I would
for their
think
school.
that they would still have to report their capacity to the school board, because the school board makes decisions upon the number of school places that are going to be needed by development coming in and also other schools. So they're
we could I guess maybe check into that. But for example, like whenever Bay District School says wear a face mask, no face mask, that didn't have any bearing on what they did at at Bay Haven or North Bay Haven, because they have their own regulations that they do there. So,
but I feel like we should know.
We can sit down and have that conversation with Mr. Bollinger and just make sure that there's not going to be an increase in, I agree with Amanda. We talked about these things before, is that, they're upon us, and instead of being proactive, then they're there, and then now it's a problem. So I think this is an opportunity for us to be a lot more proactive than before.
Because they've said there's nothing that they can do, but they haven't got buses. They could have hubs where parents bring the kids and put them on buses and they could bus them in. I feel that there are things that they could do.
they do have some buses, but it's limited to a certain radius. So like within maybe like a 3-mile radius.
Why is that?
Because they're a charter school.
But everybody drops off at a time.
I'll keep those personal reflections to myself, but yeah, it's a it's a 3-mile radius. So
Yeah.
And I've actually heard people just recently that are pulling their kids out of that school because of the whole traffic situation. They just don't have time to deal with it, and they're pulling them out.
I wish they would buy a piece of land somewhere within their radius, just a little parcel of land as like a park and ride, where the parents could bring their kids to that parcel, drop them off, they get on the bus. There's land up there within 3 miles in that area. St. Joe have got land, They could talk to St. Joe, I don't know, and someone else. They only need a parcel of land. They've got the money. They could buy a parcel of land and use that as their drop-off pickup and keep the traffic out of the development.
And what you said before, the road on the west side of the school would have solved a lot of these problems.
Yes.
A lot.
It's just like what's their incentive to look for a solution if they're not being made to look for a solution?
I don't know. I'm originally from up north, so I don't know if it's always been like this down here, but I know when I was a kid, everybody took the bus. Here, it seems like that's like out of the norm. Most people take their kids to school, so it creates another problem.
I think some of it here is school of choice. So like if your kid goes to school out of district, then you have to provide that transportation versus
That's true.
them riding the bus. And then the charter schools are limited in their radius as to how far they'll pick someone up. And I'll say, like, my kids went to charter school. They get out of school at I think he was at 2:15 at the time, but then the bus wouldn't get him home until 4:30. So then as a parent, I'm just having to sit there and wait until 4:30 before you can actually do any family activity, wait on your child to get home. So then it was just easier just to go pick them up from school or check them out early. This is being recorded, isn't it? But yeah, check them out early so that you can avoid the traffic. Just sort of plan out what checkout days you have and not have too many, go to the doctor's appointments and things like that before school gets out. But no, you're right. Yeah, I grew up riding the bus too, but I think that's part of it is.
Right.
I've gotten those texts
But-
from my daughters.
And I think this is good conversation. I know we need to move on, but that's the big other point I wanted to make is we as the commission, we need to make sure they understand the position that we're put in. And I think deep down, we really didn't want this to happen, but you didn't have a choice. And I think that's the message we need to portray to the residents saying, hey, this is the process. They've met all the requirements. Trust me, I don't want this to happen as much as you do, but this is the position we put in. And the only thing we can do is implement something so this doesn't happen again.
Yeah.
And like you said, they were told one thing when they bought, and, that's, now, in all the apartments that are being built there, are any of those, what are we calling that term?
Oh,
Workforce. Yes, workforce.
They're going to be the same as whatever Arbitrace and Arbitrace is.
Oh, yeah, I don't know.
I don't know. Yes, it's Gordon Thames, so. Shall I carry on, because there's not a lot left?
Yes.
I just wanted to, I'm just going to briefly mention plats, and then we've covered most of the things on the following slides, except for variances, which I think are important, which I'm going to cover. So you've had plats come before you, yes? If somebody wants to split their land just one time, it doesn't come before you anymore. It used to, but it doesn't now. The mayor signs off on that. That's a minor subdivision. That's what we call a minor subdivision. And we take care of that administratively. If they want to split their land into more than one, if it's going to be a subdivision, that accompanies the engineered site plans. So it has to conform to the engineered site plans, so you'll know where all the utilities are going, that kind of thing. It comes to us as a preliminary plat. We take it to the planning board and we bring it to you. And then if you approve it, they know that they can go ahead. They get on with the infrastructure and what have you. And then once the infrastructure is in place and it's all been checked out, and the things like street lights and some other things that can hold it up there was a hold up on this last one from Greg's department, because they hadn't done something they were supposed to, and also from Bobby's, and I think there was a permit. Once we've got all of those things ironed out and sorted out and everything is good, because we don't want to approve a final plat until everything has, because as soon as they get that recorded, they can start selling those lots. They can't sell the lots until you approve that final plat. So we bring it back to you as a final plat, you approve it, you all sign it, it gets recorded within 30 days, and then they're able to start selling the lots. So you're very important in these procedures, as you can see. We've done all this. Variances. So this is the last thing I think that I'm going to, last thing I'm going to talk about. We often get phone calls from people wanting to do something, from developers or from just citizens, individual citizens, and they'll want to do something, and we'll explain, unfortunately, that's not going to be possible. You can't put a shed in your front yard or whatever, let's say. And they'll say, well, why not? Can we have a variance? And developers are always asking for variances. Well, we've already said variances aren't allowed on comp plan stuff. That's just a big no. And then when it comes to other things, if someone does apply for a variance, it gets brought before the Board of Adjustments. The Board of Adjustments are a decision-making board. The planning board, as we've just said, makes recommendations, but the Board of Adjustments makes decisions. Their decision is final. It can be appealed, in which case I think it comes to you, but their decision is final. So I believe that I believe these things are in a statute, because everyone seems to has the same basis on which variances can be granted.
Can we ask the Board of Adjustments to take a look at something such as the reverting to the 1911 plat on the lot size, and then give us their recommendation?
No, you can ask
No.
the planning board.
The planning
The
board.
planning board is the board that would do that, yeah, that would look at changes to the ULDC and that kind of thing.
Or we can just vote on it in a meeting if it's an agenda item.
Well, no, because if you're making changes to the ULDC, then it has to go to the planning board for a recommendation, because it's an ordinance, and it'll have to go
When do
through.
we ask that, or potentially, like if we wanted to ask for these corner lots not to be split, it has to go back to the planning board?
Well,
Is that what I'm saying?
you can have the discussion on it, and you can direct staff to put that in place, in which case I'll draw up the ordinance, because we'll be amending an ordinance. I'll draw up the ordinance, and because it's a change to the ULDC, it'll go to the planning board for approval, telling them what the changes are and everything, and then they'll, not approval, for recommendation, and then it'll come to you for approval.
Okay.
From,
Can we schedule that,
well,
or ask that, or talk about it more, or?
from talking with, from hearing Attorney Obos the other day, we could actually vote on it now. If we just open up for discussion to the public, we could actually vote to direct, well, not direct staff, but we could vote for city manager and staff to begin working on that. We could actually do that now. We would just have to open up for public discussion if everybody's in agreement
Make a
with.
motion to do that now, or no? Does it require a motion, or?
Yeah, it requires a motion, yeah.
I'd like to make that motion.
I can't hear what you're saying.
I'd like to
so I
make
kinda
that
tuned
motion,
out.
I'm sorry, I'd like to make that motion to direct staff to see about taking the plat, taking it back to the plat so those corner lots don't get dissected.
So reverting it back to what it was in the historic plat area for low-density residential, 15,000 square feet.
I'd like to make that motion.
And I would definitely second it.
We can't do that here, though, can we?
Yeah,
Can?
yeah, we could
It's
do
open
that.
to the public.
Oh,
Any further discussion from the board? Any discussion from the public?
so, sorry.
All right, no discussion from the public. Commissioner Ward?
So, so let me make sure I got the motion, understand the motion is to make the plats what they were I forget what,
Only the historic plat.
only in the historic plat. To make them, what was the size again?
15,000 square feet.
So that people cannot build two homes on one.
Yeah, it was 15,000 square feet, and then it was changed to 7,500 square
I
feet.
got
The
you.
historic plat is more unique than anything else.
It's different.
Yeah.
And then this will go to the planning board and then come back to us.
This will go to staff, then staff will put together an ordinance, which will go to planning board and then come
Okay.
back to us.
Okay.
So we're not making a decision to change it today, but just to get it
We're
in
just
motion.
directing staff to put an order. I got
Right.
it.
Yep.
Sorry.
All right, if there's no discussion from the public, call for the vote. City manager?
Commissioner Perno,
Yes.
Commissioner Tender,
Yes.
Commissioner Ward,
Yes.
Commissioner Aldridge,
Yes.
Mayor Nelson. Excuse me?
Commissioner Tender?
Commissioner Tender.
Yes. All right, motion passed.
Thank you.
Can you close that meeting? Now you close that meeting. I think you closed it. Am I correct? He says you open up a meeting and then you can close it, so.
So at this time, we will adjourn discussion on the historical plat 1911.
Okay, and then I've just got variances to deal with, and I feel that they're really important. Because when somebody applies for a variance request, sometimes we will know that it really doesn't meet the requirements. And we'll tell people that because it's their money they're spending. But if they insist that it still goes to the board, and sometimes they're valid ones that should go to the board, then obviously they'll go to the board. So, but the Board of Adjustments, in order, and this is in the Unified Land Development Code, this is ordinance, in order to grant a variance, the variance shall be based on an affirmative response for each of the following. So in order for the Board of Adjustments to legally, according to the ordinance, say yes to the variance request, they have to be able to say yes to each of these following things. The first one is that it does not constitute a change in the district shown on the official land use map. The second one special conditions and circumstances exist which are peculiar to the land, structure, or building involved and which are not applicable to other lands, structures, or buildings in the same land use district. The special conditions and circumstances do not result from the actions of the applicant. Granting the variance requested will not confer on the applicant any special privilege that is denied by the ULDC to other lands, buildings, or structures in the same land use district. Literal interpretation of the provisions of the code would deprive the applicant rights commonly enjoyed by others in the same land use district under the terms of the ULDC and would work unnecessary and undue hardship on the applicant. The variance granted is the minimum variance that will make possible the reasonable use of the land, building, or structure. The grant of the variance will be in harmony with the general intent and purpose of the code, and that such variance will not be injurious to the area involved or otherwise detrimental to the public welfare. And finally, it is not based on economic circumstances. That the variance is granted is based on the findings required by this section. So getting a variance should be a very unusual thing. It's there not as I want to do this and you won't let me thing. It's there when people cannot do what other people in their land use district can do, but they can't because, for example, maybe the topography of their land is such that they can't meet the setbacks properly. Or we had one time where somebody wanted to put a swimming pool in, but if they stuck to the setbacks on all sides that were required, there was a city pipe went underneath. So they wouldn't be able to have a swimming pool. So they were granted a variance because that was not anything they had done. It wasn't so that they could make more money. It was purely because they weren't able to do something that other people could do for no fault of their own. So variances are not supposed to be very common things. People are expected to abide by the Unified Land Development Code. Everybody treated the same. So a variance is when, for some reason, they cannot enjoy the privileges that people around them are. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. So this is what they have to look at when they decide yes or no on a variance.
And isn't it true, I'm really saying this for Jamie's benefit, but didn't we used to charge $1,200
Do you know,
for a variance, and then we dropped it to $600 last year or the year before?
Initially when I first came here it was $300 and you were getting 10 a penny. So many people were wanting variances on this and that. And so the commission decided that they wanted to up the fees on it because the board was having to meet on things that they were going to be told no on all the time, you know? So that $1,200 was put in, I think, as a bit of a deterrent because if someone really needed it, they were going to get it because they don't get their money back if the board says no. So I think it was to kind of deter all of these carport ones and things. But then, it was reduced back down to $600.
And do they get the money back if they're told no? They don't.
No.
Yeah, because I've been to one of those, and after they paid an attorney to be there for them, and then I thought, oh, you must want this bad.
Yeah, well, you know what? And I think I know which one you mean there. And they were telling us that all they wanted to do was put a driveway, but what they weren't mentioning was the garage at the end of that driveway that wasn't meeting setbacks.
Thank you, Amanda.
That's everything I have. Thank you. And if you have any questions, get in
1
touch with me.
minute to spare.
And if you know anybody who might want this presentation, or if you want it electronically, just let me know, and I'll be happy to email it to you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's very good. Thank you, Amanda.
Can I ask a question real quick? Nothing pertaining to this. So I didn't know we could open the meeting and vote on something. Is that only on things that aren't decision-making, or is there certain rules you can?
It's just what he mentioned the other day during the meeting, the last commission meeting. He mentioned that we could, because the question was if we have a public in our workshops,
remember that.
if people came, could we actually vote on something in the workshop? And he said we could, as long as we open up for discussion to the public, that we could vote on something.
We just got to be careful with that, I think. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess what I'm getting at is we just got to be careful we don't abuse that. You know what I mean? Because obviously we know not a lot of public is not going to be here for this.
Right.
But we don't make like a real detrimental decision that, hey, we need to make sure we put this at a good time for the public.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying we disagree with what happened earlier. I think it's a good decision. I just,
You're exactly right.
I'll have to public notice it because it's a change in the Unified Land Development Code. I'll have to public notice the ordinance as well in the newspaper and the public hearing.
But no, I understand and I agree. Yeah, I don't think we'll be abusing it in moving forward. So, all right. Well, thank you all. Thank you, City Manager, for organizing this planning workshop for us today. Thank you, Amanda, for coming and the information that you've given us. Hopefully this has provided insight for all of us so that we can continue to make educated decisions moving forward. And hopefully, as I mentioned before, this will help hone in our focus as a commission that maybe we should take some time individually to look through the land code ordinances and see what things we would like to add, change, amend so that we can have more quality growth going forward. So, all right. And thank you to the other staff that were here to answer our questions as needed. Have a great day.